So the world over, like in India, there is a generation that's constantly connected to the touchscreen. And they are very tech savvy with apps and games and what have you on their fingertips. So how does one initiate them into cinema? And what is it that they will watch? How does the ecosystem become self-sustainable? These and many more concerns is what we hope to address in Monetizing Children's Content, India Perspective and Global Best Practices, and enabling us to address them. We have from Netherlands Filmfonds, we have Monique. May I please invite you to come up. We have Syed Sultan Ahmed, Managing Director, LXL Ideas. For those of you who are acquainted with Edu Media, an organization that impacts learning by making lessons for life through its verticals, which is school cinema. That's what they are. And we have Joost. I'll just say Joost. Producer, Lobster, he's going to be with us. And helping us through this journey is Urmi Juvekar, Head of Development and Production at NFDC. She also runs the Children's Screenwriters Lab at the Film Bazaar. So over to you, Urmi.
Just a little more introduction on our today's panelist. We have Monique here. She has extensive experience with children's content. She works with Netherlands Filmfonds. She has also worked as a programmer with Cinekid, and she specializes in developing children's content. Syed Sultan Ahmed is really the man we all should be sitting here and listening to, because in this, he has what is now known as LXL Media, earlier called Edu Media, and they are doing some amazing things with children's content. And then we have Joost here, who's a producer, who stands on two stones. He also makes content for adults and children. Is that right?
Sure.
Okay, so now to go back to this whole thing of why this panel. I run actually Screenwriters Lab, and last year we decided that we really wanted to get into children's content. And it was a really big learning lesson for us at many levels. Number one was, of course, the scripts that came to us were only about the child protagonist. And I kind of said, but that's not what I read as a child. That's not something I even identify with. It seems to be now I think what children do. Then this year, the whole game changed when we went to Cinekid, and personally for me, where I realized that the way we are looking at children's content is extremely myopic. We are just saying films is the only content, and then you make films for children. But I think going there, it really opened my eyes to this whole idea of what all can become children's content and what are the possibilities that are there. That is why we put this panel together, and I really think that this is going to be a little bit like Dummy's Guide to Children's Content. So let's do the first thing first, which is, I think we should see Monique's presentation, which is what opens out the whole children's content first part.
And thank you, Urmi, and thank you, Film Bazaar, for inviting me. I'm from the Netherlands Filmfonds, and I think I could talk for hours about what kind of children's films we support. But the first rule in scriptwriting is show, don't tell. So I'd like you to start with a little clip of the films we support. Please start the video. it still makes me happy. Yes, well, I'm Monique. We've already been there from the Netherlands Filmfonds. And we're an organization basically that gets money from the government every 4 years to support films and support distribution and support co-production. And children's and family films have been a priority for many years. And this has resulted in a very successful children's and family films industry. It started about 15 years ago, so that's how fast it can go if you want to make money. So over the last 10 years, about 24% of all Dutch films were children's and family films. So that's almost a quarter. And they raised almost 44% of all the admissions for Dutch films at the box office. So if you want to make money, make children's films. We've proven you can do it. And children's films are very popular in the Netherlands, also Dutch children's films. Of course, we also get the big Disney films and from America, but 9 out of 20 films, Dutch films, popular films or children's films. So it can work really well once you start building your industry, and I think you guys are about to begin, hopefully. So the industry has been great. It's been growing for the last 15 years. And as you can see, or hopefully have seen in the trailer, we make films for children at their eye level about any kind of subjects. We believe you can tackle any kind of subject in any children's film as long as you take into account at what age your target audience is and how you deal with the subject. This successful industry has also led to specialists in the field. We have specialist children's film writers. Thijs van Marle, he's sitting over there. He's one of them. He writes 2 children's films every year. Yeah, and we have specialists in producing children's film. Joost is one of them. So one of the reasons children's films in the Netherlands are so successful because they are of high quality. In the end, it's always the content that counts. So, and it's mainstream films, it's artistic films, and some people say children's film are a genre. No, they're not. They're films made for a special audience that you have to take into account, and you can produce any genre of film within children's films, which is great. The Netherlands Filmfonds funds, as I said, films mostly in the Netherlands. We also fund a few co-productions per year, but not that many, only 18 to 20 a year, and that sounds like a lot, but it's not, because we get a lot of application. But the good news is, also for Indian producers, since 2.5 years, we have a cash rebate, which means that if you manage to find a Dutch producer who's willing to co-produce with you, and you spend the eligible costs in the Netherlands, you get 30% back for free. And if you want any more information on that, I'd like to point out my colleague Bess van der Rey. He's wonderful, I think, and he can give you all the details and can help you in any way you like and give you information on the cash rebate in the Netherlands and how to get there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Monique. I think I would like to divide this discussion today in 3 parts. Of course, the content, funding, and distribution. So you said in your presentation that you look at the content for children very specifically, that you don't consider it as a genre. You don't think that just because there's a child protagonist, it's a children's film. So can you tell us a little more about how do we recognize the right content, or what can really fly with children, as opposed to what I think is children's content?
Yeah, well, the trick is, and it is kind of hard, is get into their head at the age that they're in. For instance, once this was a Canadian movie, there was a that started with a boy who was trying to hang himself from a tree. And you would say, oh my God, is this a children's film? And a lot of people discussed about it, and it was sort of on the border. And I was with a 9-year-old child to see that movie, and she was very quiet afterwards. And I asked her, what did you think of the movie? And then she said, oh, it was tough. It was tough. I said, what did you find tough? Because I was afraid she would have been worried about suicide or whatever. And then she said, yeah, those kids, when they were breaking into the house and there was no one there and it was not allowed. So that is what she, a 9-year-old, took for the film. And the same is on the film you produce, of Frogs and Toads, when the little boy goes on the bus, when he's not allowed. That is big drama in a children's life. So you have to get to their eye level and think about what happens in their life. For small children, it might be the first time going to school, or first time going out to stay with somebody else. For older childs, it might be fitting into the group or bullying. And then get your drama into those subjects.
But is it maybe also useful to distinguish, you talk about children and family film, how you distinguish between the two?
Well, I personally, I mean, it's not a clear border, but usually children's film have a story that is specifically told for the story, and of course usually have a child as a main protagonist. And I like to think of a family film that is a bit more layered, which has the main layer is for the children, but it might have a little layer for the parents as well.
You put in a sexy mom or a hot dad.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and a famous actor.
Sort of.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Because especially for small children, it's the parents who have to take the children to the movies.
Oh yeah, grandparents also. You have to target the grandparents there.
Yeah, and the grandparents. Yeah.
Okay, because this is interesting. Whenever we have asked our people that who's this movie for, what's your target group, and it's always 7 to 70. And I would like to break this myth. One of the things that I really want to stress here, that this is serious business. We are not talking about something that's 7 to 70.
There's a simple thumb of rule that children like to look up a little bit. So if you have a main protagonist of 7 years, it's usually the 5 years old who would like it. So if you have a protagonist of 7-year-old and you say your film is for 7 to 17, not much chance. Oh, here's the writer.
Hi. Hi. Hi, I'm Thijs van Marle, writer from Holland. This is one way of looking at children's content, you know, the difference between children's films and family films and the target groups. It's a very specific, in my eyes, an old-fashioned way of looking at it. I'm sorry, Monique.
Thank you.
Yes, but we are here all together now, so it's interesting to talk about. Focusing on a main target group, focusing directly on 8 or 9 or 10, and not focusing on family, will get us more specific movies with better outcome. So the 7 to 70, I would cut it down completely and look at our target groups in a most specific way, and not talk about children's or family, but talk about youth. This is a new way maybe of looking at it, but I find this is also a way of explaining it. I would say it's not a thumb of rule.
Okay.
And
there's a few things. I mean, it's about storytelling and who do you target, and you know what is the level or the way of you tell your story. But it's also for the distributor, of course, really extremely important to know what main target group he's going to be marketing to, right? I think you would agree. Absolutely. Yeah.
And that kind of brings me to this, which sort of emphasizes this point, what we are talking about a little more in detail, is to listen to Sultan, because he has opened an entire new way of looking at children's content. Because films is just, narrative films, 90 minutes, is just one kind of content. There is more to it. And Sultan, no one is better than Sultan to tell us about that.
I'm glad you said what you said, because 6 years ago when I told my mom I'm going to make films, she thought I've completely lost it. Because 15 years ago when I decided to work in the education space, she thought I'm one of those childs who's going to be a loser, right? So I was actually counseled to not work with kids, and here I am talking about kids' content. I'm an educator, so when I look at education from my perspective, especially in India and most parts of the world, education is all about the livelihood. It's about trying to get a good degree, trying to get a good education so that eventually you get a job someday. 18 years of education in this country, and most of our graduates are not employable. The reason, one of them, is that we don't focus on life which they eventually have to live. So life education or life skills is something that needs to be an integral part of the curriculum. Over the years, we've used events to teach life skills. We've used the conventional training methodology. We found that the scale was very limited. So I'm coming from a very different school of thought. I'm not talking about content. So how do you scale and talk about issues which are very relevant to children? How do you talk about gender issue sensitivity? How do you talk about religious sensitivity? How do you teach simple things like what's anger, right? Following traffic rules. Now, these are issues which need to be taken into a classroom, and very often we've kind of neglected that. So cinema for me came up from a very educated, researched perspective. I've traveled around, met a lot of filmmakers, read a lot of research about cinema and its influence on education, and just to place it on record, cinema is possibly the only medium out there that blends audiovisual, entertainment, storytelling, and emotions, all of them together. And as an educator, I realized that I can use any one of them to teach. It's a fantastic medium. Now let's look at the context of India, the world's largest filmmaking country, the world's largest young population. And what do we make for children? Hardly anything. I mean, it's bizarre, it's surprising. And so what we did was, we had to answer two questions. One was not just create good content, we also had to answer the question of how will that content get consumed, because obviously the theaters and the televisions were not interested in meaningful cinema, because whatever kids' content that I get to see in this country, we think that our children are dumb, and we create, mind my language, we create a lot of crap for them. And children reject it. Our children are very intelligent, and we need to make very intelligent films for them. So that's what we did. So today, okay, 6 years down the line today, what we've done is we've introduced cinema as a part of the curriculum. So we have almost 1 million kids in India today who watch films in their classrooms. They study a subject called school cinema. Basis the film, they have debates and discussions, they have grades. In fact, the marks card carries a grade for school cinema. And that's one side of the spectrum. And on the other side, just the quality of films that we've made, we've been in over 300 film festivals.
And you're talking about you make fiction films.
All of them are fiction. And this is not an elder trying to tell the child that you need to be honest. In fact, we have made a film on honesty, and the word honesty is not used in the film at all. The entire film does not use honesty. And like, I forgot your name, like you mentioned, our films are for 9-year-olds, for 10-year-olds, for 11-year-olds. We are very specific with the films we make. So just to take a step back, if I can just add a pointer, we do research with children to understand what issues need to be introduced at what age, right? For example, we would like to talk about communicating about careers to grade 10, and for a little one, a 6-year-old, about sharing, right? So based on that research, we actually create research dockets, which are then circulated with script writers. So they are now making a script which revolves around the message that we want to make. So that's how we work.
Sultan, you're hijacking this forum, which is great because you're blowing me away. I feel humbled by what I hear after all these films that I've done. But you are, to the audience, I can imagine, an entrepreneur out there, and that's not what there are yet. I mean, it's great. Let's put this dot on the horizon. And I'd love to talk along with you, but we also need to know what is the producing
Joost has been my teacher. I've been attending the producers lab for the past 5 days. So I've been learning from you.
So now I would like to ask you, Joost, that taking this whole issue of content and the main topic of today's discussion, or the whole reason why we have this panel, is that more producers get attracted to it. Let's get that very simple. Yeah. So now I would like to ask your opinion, your point of view on selecting content. What are the parameters you look for when you're choosing any content? Because we have heard one thing, that is young adult film, family films, then the other content, which is we're using cinema. So how would you look at visibility?
Let me first say, when we started making children films, that was at the beginning of our careers. I was working together with Leontine. We set up a company, tried to develop all kind of really international stories in Cuba and in Israel, and they never got made, and we're like, we're doing something wrong. So Leontine said, we're going to choose our niche. We're going to do children films. And I was like, in my 20s, I thought, that's not really cool, that's not sexy, but you know, let's go with it. And now I look back at the clip that you prepared, and I see these films, and like you, I also, you know, my heart warms to it. I really have been enjoying making children's films. And when we started our company, I think box office for Dutch films was like 2% or something really, really bad. And while we were doing children films, mostly on the back of children films, the box office share of Dutch films raised to almost 20%. And so we were probably lucky or visionary, I don't really know, but it worked out really, really well for us. And on the basis of that, later, like you said, we expanded into a lot of other things. Now, I've never taken the approach that you have taken, Sultan, because we really chose very much from the heart. And we did really differentiate between the different target groups and audience groups. But we were also, of course, really very dependent on finding the right material, the right writers, because there's not a lot of writers or directors out there per se who do that stuff. We also had a preference for working with original stories as opposed to books. So yeah, we did well. We made a lot of films. With distribution, we were always very clear. You know, this is a sort of a niche product. Do not expect millions of tickets sold, but let's be very clear about how wide or narrow we should position this and market it, release. And then expectations usually tended to come true. Now, recently, what we see happening is that all the other colleagues have jumped in and they have optioned and licensed all these huge children's books, and they make, in my opinion, you know, not as good films as we used to make, but hey, who am I? But they do draw the crowds.
So, okay, another issue that, as I was saying in Syndicate, when I went to Syndicate, the idea that you look for content which is easier to travel across platforms. And I would like to at least talk about that. That how do you identify, and what is it that taking something and making the whole IP issue? I think let's just get down to that first. You want to start, Monique?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as Joost was saying, we see that in the box office as well. If you take a famous or well-known IP, whether it's a book or a television series, and you build upon that block to make a film, it's usually more popular than an original story. And then at the same time, once a film is there and it is popular, there are ways to move to other platforms, to television series or online, and hopefully VR in the future as well.
And you had an example where you were telling me about a film which now is a TV series in Germany. It was, I think, Mr. Twist.
Yeah. It's one of the films that Thijs was involved in as well. It started out as a book. Then there were three very successful, now 4, but then there were 3 very successful films in the Netherlands, 1 year each. And then the Germans picked it up, and the books were sold there as well. And they now turning it into a television series, so it's starting to travel.
And I also found some projects which went from, which also looked at games as a possibility this year in the Syndicate lab. So I think this is what a producer can look at, and the inherent possibilities. It doesn't mean that you have to do everything, but it's a good idea to...
Yeah, there are several ways to go about it. Once you've thought of a story, you can talk to producers of all kinds of platforms to see if you can work together and develop it at the same time for different platforms. Or you can start with one platform and then, if it's successful, start building on other platforms.
But you are consciously thinking about this before you pick up the content?
Not at the Film Fund. We're there to support feature films, but what we do is when there's apply for production, we look, for instance, at the publicity and marketing plan from the distribution company, and then we look at how is it spread on other platforms and what is done with the IP, so we know, and how is it going to go to schools?
See, from my point of view, when I've looked at this, the whole IP issue, I think it need to be very clear. As an independent filmmaker, you focus on your content, and that has to be the prime. If it eventually lends to other platforms, that's fine. Whereas very large studios, they start off with an entire strategy, like a Disney. You've got the infrastructure, you've got a team to back it up, to market it, to produce it, to reach it. They can start visualizing from day one across platforms. Whereas as an independent filmmaker, I think it'd be the focus of creating the piece of art. That's the film should be where you start off. And because not all films lend to all platforms.
Okay. Joost, do you want to add something to that?
Well, not so much, except that I totally agree with you. I mean, it's about being a producer or an entrepreneur, which I also talked a little bit about earlier. I'm a producer, and I thought I was more of an entrepreneur, but I find out I'm more of a producer in the end, and you're more of the entrepreneur. So yeah, we do need to focus on our content, and we just do not usually have the means to make that strategy. And we should be aware of it, though. We should be aware that some of the original content does have that breakout potential, and then end up working together with you maybe to build further on it. But it starts with that great content, and I think you also need to just start in India to show that there's going to be really good films, and then of course you need to convince first your investors. It's going to be all really complex, but I do see, because it is non-existent, the potential is really there to build that market in the cinemas.
I'll just add one. It's leading to our next topic that we were discussing about how do you actually make money, right? For me, when I look at the Indian content and the Indian context, we're very, very different, right? For us, if you look at it, when I said the number that I have almost 1 million kids in watching our films and actually paying an annual license to watch it. So they're not just watching the film, they're paying money to watch it. It's only 2,100 odd schools that I'm reaching. You know what's the market size of private schools in this country? Is over 300,000, right? I don't know how many of you are even aware of those numbers. We have 1.7 million schools in this country. So if one of you decided to just get up, and I'm not talking about kids, these are schools, right? If somebody just decided to tie up with the government of Maharashtra and make content only for the schools of Maharashtra, forget about, you talked about specific, in Marathi, you want to do something specifically in Maharashtra, you're talking about 60 to 70,000 schools. To set the context for the Europeans in this audience, the whole of UK, England, Wales, Scotland, all of them put together have 9,000 schools.
Wow.
We've got a huge opportunity. So we need to look beyond the conventional means that the West has adapted. We need to figure out our own. I always loved the zero because it came from this land. It's not about getting one child into a multiplex and getting $500 out of him. It's about, can I go to 50 children, 500 children and take $10 out of him? Or go to 5,000 kids and take 1 rupee out of him, right? And that model works for us. It really, really works for us.
About finding stories,
yeah.
which is just a little thing that helps me in finding stories. Joost talked about books. It's very, in Holland it's very common in the countries surrounding us to take famous children's books and turn them into stories. But you can also look at history, moments in history, making historic picks about moments in history, looking around themes that are working with children today. You just have to find a story in a context that will get the grandparents and the parents interested, but focus your story on the child. There is, in this region, probably a huge local history. just make a brainstorm and do 3 or 4 stories about the local history, directed at the content and directed at an age group, and you will be fine. If I put it so broadly.
What Sultan you said was very interesting, because you're now talking about the audience, which you capture, and then you feel, yes, you can make films for them, you can do additional things for them. And that directly brings me to the whole issue of the funding, right? So one is the funding that is available. Of course, there's state funding, private people, but when we were discussing, you talked about some probable fundings. And would you like to?
So the reason why we call ourselves LXL Ideas is because we keep thinking. We actually have a think tank that keeps thinking. A lot of us are aware that the government made a policy that all companies, all corporate needs to spend 2% of their revenues on, the profits on social work and CSR, right? Having run an events company and worked with some of the biggest kids brands here in this country, I know that corporates have a hell of a lot of money. It's not a lot of money, they have a lot of money. Because I've been a part of the producers lab, and I've been, when people talk about how much is the budget, they talk about 1 million, they talk about 2 crores and 4 crores. And I'm like, seriously? Is that all? I thought I'm coming into an industry which keeps normally talking about 50 and 100 crores, because that's what the newspapers keep telling me, right? Because a lot of independent filmmakers, I even met a guy who made a film for 10 lakhs. Right? So you have a lot of funding that's available, but when you are approaching corporates, they remember they're corporates and they are looking at return of investment, they're looking at what's the impact. So if you can complete that loop for them, saying that I'm making a film on, let's say, children's disabilities, right? They would like to know how many children got impacted, how many watched them. So that completion of the loop is pretty important.
That was where your name comes from, the Excel sheets, where you do the recoupment, no?
So sort of merging the Excel sheet with final draft.
I want to add a little tip.
No, because the marketing guy has to go back and show that sheet to his boss. At some point of time, they need to do that.
Totally. I want to add a little tip that worked really well for us, because I said there's not always so much talent around that is as experienced as people like Thijs. But what we did at some points is when we found that we had a good story or a good script, we invited really good director who had never done a children's film, but he or she maybe just had children and suddenly was like, oh, ching, and you can get their interest. And the same goes for other talent, and that will package your film in a way that financing may become available also from equity sources.
I had the opposite experience. Every single filmmaker that I met here, almost everyone wanted to make a film for children. Almost everyone. It's just the question was, who will pay for it? How will you monetize it? So I think for us back at LXL was how do you monetize this, and how do you ensure that you can consistently fund, because there are lots of good filmmakers out there.
So just one more thing that I would really like to bring in, and I know this is a bit abrupt kind of a change, but I wanted to bring in the film festival angle in it, because that is one big source, not only for showing your films, but also experimenting. And I think we cannot forget, when we are talking about children's content, we cannot forget to look at the emerging media or experiment. So, yeah, because Ninke, would you like to speak about that? That why in Cinekid there is almost equally large section called the Media Lab. What do you achieve from that?
Hi everyone, I'm Nienke Poelsma. I'm head of Cinekid for Professionals at the Cinekid Festival. First of all, we started an industry platform 15 years ago because we really saw this emerging industry exploding and we saw the need of it in the industry, so we created a platform for them. And then we created also site links, which created a media lab, which is an interactive playground for children with interactive installations, because we think it's really important to look abroad, because our audience are early adapters, and we were talking about they're living in third and second screens, and television is almost background noise for them nowadays. So we thought it was really important for them for us as a festival to explore different ways of showing content and telling stories without an actual storyline. So that's why we initiated the Media Lab, and we always try to combine these industries at our industry platform as well. So it's an exploration, and it's going to take time, of course, to see what actual comes out of it and see the collaborations happening, but we really want to be a platform for that as well.
Yeah, I think, yes, sir, go ahead.
I just want to, because I saw the clock, I just want to add one point, and I thought it was very relevant. Like I mentioned, that there are stories out there in India, there is money out there. We've done an experiment, and we're going to extend that experiment to much larger. So we went to a school and proposed to the school that saying that your cost per child is 400 rupees per year, that's what you're paying for the program. Can you pay 600, and you choose a school in your neighborhood which cannot afford this program, and we'll run the same program for them. Almost everyone paid, right? So the kids were themselves and the parents were actually willing to pay. So it's just about creating opportunities for people to engage, and money is there as well. So I think we just need to look at creative ways, and hopefully in the next few years we find more, because I want to produce a feature.
Yeah, and can I make a final point?
Yes.
Because we talked about this as well. You know, children are your future audience. If you talk about monetizing, if you're able to expose your children to quality media, whether it's short film or feature film, they'll go to the cinemas or look for quality when they're older and teach their kids. So it's really also an investment in the future.
Yeah, so there we have.
Hi, thanks for a wonderful session. My name is Rita. I have a question to all of you actually, but Syed did talk about some statistics here about the target audience size. So if we talk of India alone, we've got about 31 million under the age of 15, so 0 to 15, so which alone is about 400 million plus audience. My question to you is that how do we kind of reach out to this audience, right? You're talking about reaching out to 1 million at present, but that's a very, very minuscule percentage. What are the
reason why I gave you statistics of schools was simply because it's one of the most organized spaces for you to reach out to children. Because I have an experience of running an events company called Crayon, I can tell you specifically, if I were a brand in India, and if I wanted to bring together 5,000 children in Mumbai, right? I'm spending anything from 20 to 50 lakhs to bring them together for an event. I can spend 15,000 rupees and walk into a school and run a school contact program and reach 5,000, because there are lots of schools with 4,000 and 5,000 children. So if the mountain doesn't come to Muhammad, Muhammad goes to the mountain. So we need to now figure out our ways to reach spaces where children are there, right? I think that's where the thinking, the creativity, and our innovation needs to come in. And it's not just about looking at conventional distributors and saying that, how do I reach it through the conventional methods? In India, to reach children, let's look for more solutions.
Hello. Yeah. Hi, my name is Ranjita. I have a slightly different question, because from what I understand, we were talking about feature films, we are talking about short films for kids. Where does documentary films for children stand in?
Documentary films for kids is a wonderful idea, and it's great to do. It's extremely rewarding for you as a person, but you have one really big problem, and that is that the broadcasters really don't know where to program it. Because they have documentary slots in the evening for grown-ups, they have entertainment slots in the afternoon, but where to go? So you really need to then first establish relationship with the broadcaster and work together and find a new...
There's good news, because we're
Always.
talking to the broadcaster.
Guys, you are full of good news.
Well, we try. We're talking to the broadcasters, because in the Netherlands there's a program for, it's called Kids and Dogs. Syndicate is involved as well. It's been running for over 10 years as well. So we've created now a very strong industry for short documentaries for kids, and the next phase will be, hopefully, to start looking for a feature documentary for kids. So they're not forgotten, but we're still working on it.
Or TV series documentaries also.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Yes, please.
Hi, sir. My name is Aniket. I'm from Kolkata. I'm a filmmaker. And you told about short films, documentaries, feature films, and all that. What about the possibilities of VR? If I want to involve children into a particular environment, I think the VR is the best idea, right?
Yes, start doing it.
Yeah, I think
I said yes. Let's do it. Right. So a lot of these things, let me tell you this.
Yeah.
Right. If we keep asking questions, there are a lot of people who are asking questions. There are lots of people who have phenomenal ideas. They can just have a cup of coffee with that idea. What changes the world is if you go out there and try it. So I think you should try VR and take it to a school, because I think it's one of the best mediums. I would love to hear study circulatory system and the respiratory system using VR, or I'd love to go back into geography and study it through VR. You know, if I could actually touch the coal, and you know, it'd be phenomenal, right? Kids would love it. They'll understand it better. Somebody needs to do it.
I just want to... Great.
Yeah, he did it.
I think the whole idea behind this panel, and we are really out of time, but the whole point is to look at the possibilities. And if they don't exist, to create them. Obviously, the reason is that we just don't have them. We don't have a lot of things. But does that mean that we'll never have them? So on that note, thank you very much. Thank you, Monique. Thank you, Sultan. Thank you, Joost.
Thank you, wonderful audience. It was really nice.
Thank you.